freak show tunes. Today, Joe Biden issued new executive orders, or royal proclamations, as we say in my cultural tradition. As a matter of fact, it was one of the complaints of you rebel colonials against poor old George III that laws were getting vaporized by the royal prerogative. Yet, ever since January the 20th, in neo-monarchical Washington, we've had legislation by photo op. Whoever's waggling that moth-eaten old sock puppet maneuvers Joe into position. They slide the executive order under his nose. He signs, and it's now the law of the land. He's doing it at a brisk clip, and today he turned to the big one for many Americans, quote-unquote gun control.
They're phony arguments suggesting that these are Second Amendment rights at stake from what we're talking about. But no amendment to the Constitution is absolute.
I've no idea what that really means. An amendment is part of the Constitution, and the Constitution is certainly constitutionally absolute, at least until they can rustle up a judge to rule that the Constitution is unconstitutional, which judicial decision should be coming any day now, probably from the Ninth Circuit. In practical terms, the measures include restrictions on pistol stabilizing braces, which Joe Biden claims allow handguns to be used as high accuracy, low recoil rifles, and yet with the easy concealability of a pistol. A new rule closing yet another supposed loophole on so-called ghost guns you can assemble yourself. Ghost guns is one of those new scary terms they've come up with. A national red flag law allowing family members or law enforcement to go to court for a suspension of an individual's Second Amendment rights, and a gun control advocate as head of the ATF. Boy, I cannot wait to see the impact these moves have on child shootings in Chicago every weekend. Behind these executive actions, Biden hinted at a rather devious legal theory.
Today, we're taking steps to confront not just the gun crisis, but what is actually a public health crisis. Nothing I'm about to recommend in any way impinges on the Second Amendment.
In no way whatsoever. An odd verbal tick he's got there. The more he insists nothing he's doing impinges on the Second Amendment, the more ammo sales go through the roof. But executive orders on guns in the name of public health may be a runner. In the last year, we've seen massive restrictions on freedom of movement, freedom of religion, freedom of association, freedom to work, freedom to leave your home, freedom to have your relatives round for Thanksgiving, freedom of speech, as we'll discuss later, all in the name of public health. Last summer, our public health officials excused the looting of American cities on the grounds that white privilege is a public health crisis. Given the woeful quality of our judges, it's not hard to imagine some nitwit jurist signing on to the idea that public health trumps the right to bear arms. Top Shot champion and gun rights activist Chris Cheng is here. Chris, what do you make of what Joe Biden proposed today?
Yeah, what the president proposed, he's basically talking out of both ends, where he's saying that these executive orders will not infringe on our Second Amendment rights. Then he goes on to list a whole number of infringements on our Second Amendment rights. And so what is concerning and frightening is that all of these gun control measures are not going to do anything to improve public safety. They're not going to do anything to reduce mass shootings, and really, we're still going to be we're still going to have a huge problem on our hands with violence in our country. And so I'm very disappointed, but not surprised, to see President Biden come out today in support of some pretty strong gun control measures.
This ghost guns thing is just the latest. Every so often these guys come up with a scary term and they want to abolish ghost guns, and ghost guns sounds pretty scary, but it's basically just hobbyists. I mean, I've got a neighbor of mine who likes to work, and he's actually a bleeding heart liberal, but he actually likes to work on guns, taking them apart, putting them back together as his hobby. That does absolutely absolutely nothing for the appalling, disgraceful epidemic of crime in Democrat-run cities, does it?
It absolutely does not. And, you know, America has a long tradition of citizens being able to make firearms at home. At the end of the day, firearms are simply a mixture of metal and plastic parts. And so, yeah, the term ghost gun is a completely made up political term that is supposed to make us scared, right? That Americans are somehow doing something new, when in fact this isn't anything new. You know, it's something also that you can't really control what people make in their own homes. And so the idea of the government trying to restrict something that one can make in their own home, it's sort of one of these laws. If they even pass a law, like, how are you even going to enforce it?
But isn't that the problem with the red flag thing too? That essentially, I mean, everybody knows, for example, when you take a complaint to a court and a policeman comes round and confiscates your guns. There's a lot of kind of crude revenge in this. Domestic people in divorce court, one files a complaint against the other. The cop knocks on the door. The guns are taken. Red flag laws just make a national red flag law would just make that even looser, even more prone to just crude revenge, wouldn't it?
Yeah, the problem with red flag laws is right now it is this patchwork of different state regulations, and you know, ultimately, who is supposed to be the trusted arbiter of whether an individual is you know, of sound mind to retain their Second Amendment rights? And so, you know, the proposals that the president's administration is going to come forth with, I'm pretty sure is going to fall short of the due process requirements that gun rights advocates such as myself want to see, to ensure that we're striking some sort of balance between our Second Amendment rights and mental health advocacy.
And meanwhile, all the bad guys will still be putting bullets into 3-year-old kids in Chicago caught in the crossfire because they happen to be crossing the wrong intersection. A terrible situation. Thank you for that, Chris. As I said, Joe's signing pen, which is presumably remote controlled by Susan Rice, the World Economic Forum in Davos, George Soros, the Chinese Politburo, Ernst, Stavro, Blofeld and Spectre, take your pick. Joe's signing pen is now a one-man legislative branch, but today's orders are nevertheless an expansion of its power. Gail Trotter is a constitutional lawyer, and Gail, what's interesting to me, well, not actually interesting to me about this, is rather scary. But this is the extension of executive order explicitly at one of the rights adumbrated in the Bill of Rights, so a core right. Is it constitutionally a bit iffy to you?
I'm so glad you brought this up, Mark, and I'm so glad you're covering this topic, because the Supreme Court held that the Second Amendment guarantees an individual right to possess firearms for self-defense. And like you said, unlike some of the rights that the Supreme Court has guaranteed, individual rights, some would say have invented, this one is in the literal text of our Constitution, of our Bill of Rights, the right to keep and bear arms. And there are only 2 other times in the Bill of Rights where the people are guaranteed an individual right. That's in the First Amendment, the right to assemble and petition the government, and in the Fourth Amendment to be secure against unreasonable searches and seizures. And you said at the beginning of the show, our history with England and understanding that we are a people under the rule of law, and all the things in our Bill of Rights, like the fact that the government cannot control our speech, the fact that the government cannot tell us which religion to profess. This is what undergirds all of those rights. And without the Second Amendment, you really have a situation where you switch the balance of power from the government, from the people to the government. And unfortunately, we all want to have a safer society, but these executive orders by the Biden administration are just basically gun-grabbing attempts where they're going to take away gun rights from the sane and the law-abiding, and you're not going to have any effect on the criminals who are behind the violence.
Their thinking, though, I take it, is this, that if you were to say, we're done with the Second Amendment, it's over, and we're going to move to get rid of it, everyone goes nuts. But they figure, don't they, that they can nibble away at it bit by bit by bit, and eventually, with enough executive orders, there'll only be like, 47% of the Second Amendment left.
That's right. And you might remember the very important Supreme Court decision, Heller. That was the case that really supported this understanding of the Second Amendment, that it has an individual right to possess firearms that are typically held for law-abiding purposes. And you might remember the dissenting judge in that case wrote an opinion saying, oh, what's the problem for people in D.C. because they're on a mere subway ride away, they can go to a jurisdiction where they can exercise their Second Amendment rights. And fortunately, the majority opinion in that case understood that it doesn't work to get on a subway and coax a criminal to go with you to exercise your right to self-defense in Maryland instead of D.C. So we have to make sure that we citizens insist on exercising our rights, because the Supreme Court only takes up a few cases every year. They don't take up a lot of Second Amendment cases. So this action should be opposed, and you should let the Department of Justice and the White House know that you understand what they're doing, exactly what you said, Mark. They're trying to chip away at our fundamental Second Amendment rights.
And I certainly agree with what you said about having to maintain them in every jurisdiction. It's not enough for it to be in the neighboring state, as you were saying there. Great to see you, Gail. And this is eventually, I think, I know John Roberts is shy about taking a lot of these controversial topics, but I think it will eventually wind up before the High Court. Thank you, Gail.